I still remember the exact moment my heart broke for the second time. The first time was when I received the folded flag and the Purple Heart Medal after my husband died in service. The second time was when I discovered that the woman who was supposed to be my family had sold that medal, the last piece of my husband I had left. My name is Elena. For 6 years after my husband's death, I tried to rebuild my life while raising our daughter alone. My stepmother, Margaret, had moved in with us, offering to help. At first I was grateful, but slowly I began to notice things disappearing, small things at first, then more valuable ones. One quiet afternoon, I opened the wooden box where I kept my husband's Purple Heart. It was gone. I searched everywhere, my hands shaking. When I finally confronted Margaret, she looked me straight in the eyes and said, "You don't need that old thing anymore. I sold it to help with the bills. That medal wasn't just metal and ribbon. It was every late-night call, every prayer, every promise my husband made before he left for his final deployment. And she had sold it like it was nothing." I stood there shattered, unable to speak. But what I didn't know that day was that this betrayal would lead to something none of us saw coming. The pain didn't come all at once. It came in waves. Every time I looked at my daughter, I saw her father's eyes. And every time I thought about that Purple Heart being in someone else's hands, something inside me broke a little more. Margaret continued living in my house as if nothing had happened. She even started planning a big garden party to celebrate her birthday, inviting all her friends, neighbors, and people from the country club. I stayed quiet for weeks. I cried in the shower so my daughter wouldn't hear. I barely slept. The betrayal cut so deep because she wasn't just a stepmother. She was the only mother figure my daughter had left. Then one evening, I found the receipt. She had sold my husband's Purple Heart for just $800 to a private collector. $800. That was the price she put on my husband's sacrifice. I felt something shift inside me that day. The sadness slowly turned into a quiet, burning resolve. I wasn't going to scream or cry in front of her. Instead, I started making calls. I reached out to my husband's old unit. I spoke to the Veterans Affairs office. And most importantly, I contacted the military police. They told me what she had done was not only heartless, it was illegal. The Purple Heart is a protected military decoration. Selling it is a federal offense. I didn't tell Margaret anything. I let her continue planning her perfect garden party with the beautiful flowers, the string lights, and the expensive catering she paid for with the money from selling my memories. The day of the garden party arrived. Margaret was glowing in her new dress, laughing with her friends, telling stories about how she had raised my daughter after my husband's death. The garden looked magical. Exactly the image she wanted to show the world. Then, at the peak of the party, everything changed. 4 military police officers in full uniform walked through the garden gate. The music stopped. Everyone turned silent as the officers approached Margaret. "Ma'am," one of them said clearly, "we have reason to believe you're in possession of and have sold a stolen Purple Heart medal belonging to Sergeant First Class Daniel Ramirez. You are under investigation for unlawful sale of a military decoration." Margaret's face went completely pale. Her wine glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the stone path. All her friends stood there in shock, staring at her. The officers continued, loud enough for everyone to hear. "We have recovered the medal. The buyer has cooperated fully. This is a serious federal offense." Margaret tried to speak, but no words came out. For the first time, she had nothing to say. I stood at the edge of the garden, watching everything unfold. I didn't feel joy. I felt justice. Quiet, dignified justice. Later that evening, after the guests had left and the officers were gone, Margaret sat on the couch with tears running down her face. She looked at me and whispered, "I never thought." I looked at her calmly and said, "That's the problem, Margaret. You never thought about what that medal meant to me or to my daughter." She moved out 2 days later. I got my husband's Purple Heart back. It now sits in a place of honor in our living room, where it always belonged. That experience taught me something I will carry for the rest of my life. Never let anyone diminish the value of your pain or your memories, especially not those who are supposed to protect them. Sometimes justice doesn't come with loud arguments. It comes quietly, with dignity and truth. And when it finally arrives, it doesn't need to raise its voice, because the silence that follows betrayal says more than any scream ever could.